educational arena, advocating for your child, traveling, and even dating. Entre Comadres. Hola Comadres, welcome to the 14th episode of Comadreando. I'm your host Marcy, and today we have an illustrious guest. His name is Pabel Martinez, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. Who are you?
Hey, illustrious? Yo, that's a hell of an intro. I appreciate that. But yeah, Pabel Martinez, native New Yorker. Shout out to the Dominicanos out there. De lo mío. And I mean, currently I'm full-time at TikTok as a global account director. And on the side, which is really my passion project, running my own small business called Plurawl with the mission of redefining professionalism.
Awesome. So the way I met Pabel, well, we haven't met in person just yet, but the way I heard of him was that he was interviewed by the ladies of El Salon, and I just so happened to be the producer that day. So I was thinking how I could bring him on the show and basically talk about today's topic, which is the corporate world versus people with disabilities. So one of the reasons why this topic is important to me is that I've thought about what it's going to be like for my son in the future as he becomes an adult. He's 13 right now, going to high school next year. And one of my ultimate goals is when he enters the workforce to be able to create a more inclusive environment for people with special needs going forward in the future. So you said you work for TikTok and you're a global accounts manager or director?
Director.
Okay. So what is it that you do exactly?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like a fancy way to say sales. So at the end of the day, I'm responsible for revenue and relationships. And all of the global account directors, we all have a client, if you will, which is just an advertiser. So the advertiser that I work with is Samsung. So my job is to help Samsung achieve their business goals. And then if I help them do that, then they'll continue investing, right? So the more that they invest, the more of the goals that I'm able to deliver, then the more that they invest. It's just like a circle, you know what I mean? It's a cycle. And most of these companies, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, like all of them, they make money through ads. It's the only way they make money. So I help them with their ad strategy in order to sell more phones, for example, cell phones, TVs, all of those kind of things. But yeah, it's and then the relationships that I build are really like with the C-suite, the executives of Samsung. So it's a pretty dope job. But I think one of the things that is really powerful though is that representation piece that you mentioned before, right? Because at one point, like I didn't even see tech as a career field for me. You know what I mean? But then I saw somebody told me that they worked in tech, and I was like, huh? Like people work at TikTok? I just thought it was all algorithm. Like I just thought it was like one big computer just controlling everything, right? So seeing someone with special needs being reflected at them, like someone could see that and say like, oh, like if they could do it, I can do it. You know what I mean? So that representation, like I'm really, really passionate about it. And I think it's really powerful.
Awesome. So basically you saw somebody that looked like you in the career of technology and that kind of made you want to go into the field?
Kinda. So I just knew somebody. It was like a cousin that I had through marriage who was working at Google at the time. And he didn't look like me because the side of the family that is through marriage is Irish. So he literally looked nothing like me. But it was still that proximity to someone that I knew that worked at Google. I was like, huh? Again, people work there. I just thought it was like a search engine on the back end, right? So once I did get into the tech world, I didn't see that many people look like me. Which is when I got hit with imposter syndrome. And so imagine like me finally getting that dream job, but then looking around, not seeing people that look like you. And then you're like, maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I don't deserve to be here. Right. So then you get all those like messages in your head and those voices in your head. Right. And then eventually where I'm at now is like, you try to be the representation that you wish you had when you first stepped in there.
I love that, Pabel. I want to kind of touch on that, like with respect, because I'm a teacher. I'm a special education teacher. So yeah. I want to say growing up in the Heights, at the time that I grew up in the late 80s, when I was in elementary school, a lot of the teachers that I met were not people that looked like me. Yeah. It was like, I'm like right by Yeshiva University. So it was a lot of Anglo-Saxon, Jewish women, that were teaching us, right? And a lot of them had like the best intentions at heart, but I did not see myself represented in the people that were teaching me, which was like a big thing. Because at the end of the day, like my mother came from Dominican Republic as a, immigrant. And she was a teacher in Dominican Republic. So I was looking for people that looked like my mom when I went to school. So, once as I got older, like I feel like it wasn't until I went to high school that I saw teachers that were people of color. Number one, like my one teacher that was of color was Mr. Fertulian. Shout out to Mr. Fertulian. He was my second grade teacher. He's actually Haitian Dominican. So he was raised in Dominican Republic, and like he knew about the culture. So I saw myself in him. So I feel like representation matters a lot, because like once I saw Mr. Fertulian and what he was doing for the students in the school, it kind of inspired me to pursue my career in teaching later on in life. So it that is like key. Like I feel like, yes, we're all people of color. No, we do not all have the same background, because there's different experiences. But I feel like if you can see somebody that looks like you, that dresses like you, it like hits home, and it kind of sets a narrative that you can be more than what people expect of you, especially coming from, Washington Heights, or like, the Bronx, or like like being an inner city kid.
Oh, 100%. I'll give you one, like even outside of school or outside of careers, like till this day I do not enjoy reading. And I think it's because of growing up I felt so insecure about reading. I mean, first of all, like I just think there's so many big words out there that like we don't even need to be using. Like I feel like I need to like read a book with a dictionary next to me. It'd be like, oh, this person was like walking up the edifice. Like just say building. Like, why you gotta make it complicated? You know what I mean? But not only that, it was just like so boring and like unrelated to me, right? So like I always say, like I've, despite my success and all these other things, like I've only read probably like 5 books front to back, full, completely. And I'm not talking books that like they made me read in high school or made me read in college. I'm talking about like I purchased a book and read it myself. And the first book that for pleasure. And the first book that I've ever read front to back was The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. And it was the first time when I read a book and I saw the word yo in it, or like I saw the word pendejo or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it was just like these Dominicanisms where I was like, this is actually fun. You know what I mean? I felt seen, I felt heard, I felt like all these feelings, right? And those sort of feelings translate at work too, right? Because like one of the best things that I've ever done in like career wise, like not accomplishment, but I used to do these career fairs where I would invite like high school students, right, from like the Heights and the Bronx, stuff like that. The looks on these kids' faces when they're like, oh, you work here? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And like the people that I used to bring in for the panel, like they would intentionally leave their hair curly, for example. They wouldn't straighten it so that even the kids, like simple stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like, because it's not just about being there. It's about being there and holding on to your identity while you're there as well, which is a big challenge.
Yeah, I feel like going back to the big book, like the vocabulary in the books, like I felt like, okay, so I grew up in the Heights. Yes, my mom was like, an educated person. And I felt like a lot of the time I couldn't really relate, because I was a nerd. I was a hardcore nerd. I'm talking about like, Dad used to take me to the library to take out 25 books a month. Really? And he would actually like have conversations with me to ask me like, yo, so what is this book about? So I got my love of reading from him. But a lot of the time I didn't feel like, even though I am Dominican, I am from the Heights, I felt like a lot of the cultural things I couldn't really relate to, because I don't know, it's just like wasn't my thing. Like I wasn't there, like, outside playing with kids. Like my mom would kill me, number one. My mom did not do that at all. So there's a difference between being educated, right, and then being relatable to other people. So yes, I have these enormous vocabulary words. Am I going to use that with every person? No. You know what I'm saying? You have to be relatable, and you have to like read your audience as well. Because for example, as a teacher, as a special education teacher particularly, I have a lot of meetings with parents, right? And I write IEPs, which is like an educational plan for students with special needs. Like, how am I going to meet that student's needs based on whatever the disability is, or what that student needs to succeed? what do I gain by using all these crazy vocabulary words that the parents are not gonna understand, and then they're still gonna like walk out of the meeting like, huh, like what's gonna happen in the next year? You know what I'm saying? So I feel like that's important. Like, yes, get that vocabulary, but at the end of the day, you still have to be relatable to people. I feel like it's very important. So, you used to work at Facebook, yes?
Yeah. For 4 years, I was there.
So I did a little research about Facebook, and going back to our topic, which is people with special needs in the workplace. I looked up the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2020, and they stated that 34.6% of people's with disabilities compose the employment population rate, right? So out of the entire employment people that are employed, 34.6 have a disability. Then Facebook claimed on their website that 4.7% of their US-based employees identify as people with disabilities. I would like to challenge that because according to ADA, the American Disabilities Act, you are not required to disclose your disability to people, right? So
yeah,
that's the people that actually claim their disability that need accommodations, like whatever it is that they need to succeed to be able to do their job correctly. So yes, it's getting better, but like I know for a fact there's people that I work with that they don't tell me that they have a disability, but when I go in and I speak to them and like mannerisms and like social awkwardness and stuff like that, you like start thinking, and then you're like, okay, this person might have a disability, right? So it goes hand in hand, like not necessarily transparency, it's kind of that authenticity, like being able to create an inclusive environment where those people feel heard and seen, and that they feel okay, that they will not be discriminated by being themselves and like presenting themselves and like being like, hey, I have autism, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, so TikTok I was looking up, and your company doesn't have a lot of statistics online just yet, but I'm thinking it's because they're pretty young still, you know. But
yeah, no, the company's really young, and it may come up under ByteDance instead of TikTok because that's the company that owns them. But no, that's a really good point. I mean, like diversity and inclusion data is not always as accurate as we would expect it to be, or as accurate as we want it to be, because to your point, right? Like it's dependent on employees to actually disclose some of that data. For example, another one that's really difficult to calculate and measure is sexual orientation, right? Like some companies want to claim that, maybe they want to claim that they're LGBTQ friendly, and I'm just making this up, right? But like, let's say 30% of our workforce self-identifies as LGBTQ, right? And there are, I don't know, 5 out of the 10 people on our board identify as that as well, right? But like, that's a very personal thing that maybe they don't want to disclose because that isn't maybe as easy to identify just by looking at someone, right? But there's so many things within that, right? I mean, there's this really good example. I don't know if you know Mark Prichard. He's the chief brand officer at P&G. You do know who he is?
No, I don't really. I think I've heard his name. I don't know what I'm drawing a blank with what he looks like.
He looks like a white man, pretty much, right? Like, I'll send you a picture later, but he's the chief brand officer at P&G, which is one of the biggest companies in the world. So he's one of the most powerful men in advertising. He's Mexican, and he hid the fact that he was Mexican for his entire career up until about 3 years ago. And he said that he feared being discriminated and being labeled certain negative things. Now, if this white passing man decided to hide his identity and feared, imagine people that are like individual contributors. Imagine us. Imagine people with disabilities. You know what I mean? Like, imagine the fear that they're going through in a much less powerful space. So that, like, I always think about that when it comes to some of that data as well.
Yeah, I was looking at so I did a little bit of research, like kind of I went on a blog basically that this is for people that have disabilities. So it's like kind of giving them advice, like, hey, when should you let your employer know whether you have a disability or not? So it's like they were like saying like you might want to say it in your application, right? You might want to say it during the interview, or you might want to say it after you got hired. This is all dependent on whether your visibility is actually, the disability is visible. So if you can see that you're disabled, or if you need, like, let's say you're a person that is in a wheelchair, you're going to need certain accommodations. So for example, like the interview room, you know, when you're going in there, you want to be able to move seamlessly, independently, you know what I'm saying? So like they were like just giving advice on that, and even then they're like, it's your business whether you want to disclose it or not. So you know, a lot of the time I don't know, like I feel like I have like the disability eye, like instead of queer eye, I have disability eye. So like because I've been working, I have 8 years in special education, and my son has autism. So I feel like I can tell when certain people have a disability, but like I feel now I'm more sensitive to it, because, you know, with children, I can tell right away, but with adults, I have caught myself getting annoyed sometimes, not necessarily like they do things that, or like I had certain expectations of adults, right? And I would catch myself getting annoyed. I'm like, why? I would have to sit with it and be like, why is this bothering me? Like, you know, this person is just asking a question. But then when you dig deeper, it's kind of like you have these expectations for adults. And yes, I have these children that I'm teaching in the classroom, but those kids are going to grow up and they're going to be adults in the workforce. So it's like kind of like checking myself and looking at how we treat people that are different than us, you know, in the workplace, which is a big thing, you know. So there's people that are like socially awkward, or they try to make, you know, small talk, especially people with autism. Like a lot of people that I know that have autism are not that great socially. Like they'll try to start a conversation with you, or they'll initiate it, but then they don't know how to like do turn taking, or like they'll start talking about random things, like, and then you have to kind of like think about what they're saying and take it with a grain of salt. Or like sometimes they'll try to be funny and it's not necessarily funny. I don't know how to describe it, but like it's like being more,
no, I know exactly what you're
like
talking about.
More tolerant. But like now that I'm like mentioning that, because we were having a conversation before, like via DM, about the topic today, and you said that you really don't know if you've worked with people with special needs. But now that I'm mentioning that, do you think that you've interacted with somebody at like either this job or in the past that had special needs, and like what was their experience like, more or less?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think it's depending on like what is visible, which makes it a little tricky. I think the interesting part, before getting into that, I think the interesting part about like where the world is right now is that so many jobs are moving to remote opportunities as well. So like that opportunity to like get your work done, deliver on what needs to be done, and not have to interact in some of those situations which may be uncomfortable for a specific person, where for someone else, like they love those, right? Like again, social interaction, being in a room with a bunch of people, feel, you know what I mean? Like all of those sort of uncomfortable feelings, like you may not have to do that anymore, right? Even something as simple as an interview, going in person. Imagine if you're in a wheelchair, like, and feeling uncomfortable about telling the recruiter that you have specific needs that need to be met in order for you to even get into the building, to get into the room, et cetera, right? Like now, you may never have to disclose that. You may never have to meet your coworkers in person. They may never know, you know? So it may just remove some of those uncomfortable situations. So I'm actually very encouraged the fact that a lot of people are just like opening up to that opportunity, as far as not people, more so companies, so that employee bases could be a bit more diverse. But in the experience that I've been at companies, I haven't necessarily noticed those cues that you were mentioning, but I have worked with people or been around people at certain companies that have, and I don't, I don't know how to say this, because this is me like, oh my God, please don't get canceled and say this incorrectly.
You can say whatever. At the end of the day, it's a learning experience. So, you know, before I became a teacher, when I grew up, I'm older than you are. So when I grew up, the R word, like saying that somebody is retarded, as an insult was acceptable, and it's no longer,
Yeah.
acceptable. And even like referring to a person that has autism, back in the day they'd be like, oh, that person is autistic, as if that is the only thing that they are. So now the language changes as well. So like a person with autism, this is an individual, and it just so happens that the autism is like let's say you have a pizza and you're ordering like a supreme or whatever the heck it is, and the autism is like a pepperoni. You know what I'm saying? It's not like all that there is to that person. So going back to what you're saying, like whatever you say is fine. It's a learning experience, and if I can help you, I can probably help other people that don't really know.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I guess so. In my experience, I've seen two things. I've seen, and I don't know if they were autistic, but we'll just say socially awkward, and they were trying to transition into a sales role, which is very client facing. Like you have to mostly, engage with external clients. Your whole job is to build relationships. And the one thing that I try to do is work for companies that believe in like strength-based organizations. So not necessarily helping you work on things that you're not good at, but helping you do the thing that you're good at all the time, right? So identifying the fact that like, hey, I know you want to get into sales, but maybe that's not the most comfortable thing for you, but you're really good at this. And then helping them find a career path that it aligns with their strengths and things that they're really good at, right? So that's one thing I've seen. And then the other thing that I've seen is I used to work with a colleague that did everything with one arm. It was like the most functional arm that they had. And again, I don't really know how to say this, but I've never seen anyone say anything negative. I've never seen anything like treat this employee any differently. Never seen them sort of hold different standards or expectations that are lower compared to other employees, sort of like treat them equally and the same. You know what I mean? So I was really encouraged by that. And, because I'm sure that there are certain environments where that isn't the environment, right? And this person is, disrespected and treated unfairly and all these other things. So those are like the two experiences that I've seen.
I love that, because that makes me hopeful for the future. Because at the end of the day, like, these kids grow up and not everybody is as accepting. I feel like the way that society is going right now, like people are being more sensitive and more conscious of how they treat other people, and how we represent like the entire population. There was this one article though when I was looking for the statistics on like diversity at TikTok. I didn't know what was a parent company, but there was this one article that kind of, I don't know if you heard of it, but like a German magazine or Dutch, I don't quote me on what country it was from, but they basically said that a lot of the people with disabilities that were TikTokers were being flagged, and their content wasn't being as exposed as much because there was like some kind of algorithm or monitors. Rather, they were flagging them as people that would be like bullied, cyberbullied by other people. So like they were like protecting them in a way. So I don't know. Did you hear about this?
I did not see that. No. I'm surprised by that though, because I feel like TikTok is one of those. I feel like TikTok is one of the only places on the internet, and I'm not saying that because I work there, but I'm just saying that because I've seen the success on the platform, even for like my personal content, where like people feel the most comfortable keeping it real. You know what I mean? I feel like on Instagram, people try to put up this facade of like everybody dresses like they're in GQ magazine. You know what I mean? You got to have the perfect lighting with the perfect background, the perfect art and all that kind of stuff. Where on like TikTok, people just be shooting content in their pajamas. And I've seen a lot of content with people with disabilities actually. I've seen people with disabilities do like educational content, but they even do a lot of like self-deprecating humor. And I was like, oh my God, I wasn't ready for that. But like, they're so comfortable just like talking about it, and making, fun of themselves in a way, which is like, not necessary, but it's just like what that specific creator wanted to do. But like, I would never see that on other platforms where I feel like people tried so hard to curate like a certain look. You know what I mean? And on TikTok, I feel like people are a lot more comfortable just being themselves. But I haven't seen that specific example.
Yeah, the article is from like March 2020, so I'm sure like things have changed, you know. But I mean, I could see where like they would like step in to kind of like protect people, which is like admirable. But you know, like at the end of the day, it's kind of like me as a mom, like yeah, I want to protect my child, but also I want to expose them to him to like the real world, because like at the end of the day, not everybody's gonna be tolerant. So like how do we teach them and get them ready for the workforce or the real world rather, and have them be able to have like that one TikToker you were talking about that has a self-deprecating humor. How do we prepare our children to be that way, you know, and be able to own the fact that yes, I have a disability, but that doesn't mean I'm less than you are, or I can't do the things that you do. I just do them differently. So
Yeah, I agree.
I always say that children, especially children with autism, because I feel like, you know, special education teachers get exposed to different types of disabilities a lot, but like my field was children with autism, so I feel like they have the same wiring as us. It's just wired differently, and they think of things in a different way. So like their superpowers, I feel like a lot of the kids that I work with, they're able to focus on things for longer periods of time, especially like way more than us. Like I feel like I have ADHD, honestly, but you know, they can focus and like look at things in a certain way that we, because we're like paying attention to everything else, don't necessarily look at it that way, which is very interesting. And another thing is like they're just very honest. Like Aiden, like, you know, he'll be like, people will come up to him and be like, oh hey, I'm like, oh hey, don't you want to go give such and such a hug or a kiss? And he's like, no. So I have to kind of like, you know, I have to like kind of excuse him, but also like I'm not gonna force him to do something he doesn't want to do, because at the end of the day, like when we do things like that, like that ends up being like a problem later on. Like, you know, you have to kind of I know you don't have kids yet, but it ends up being a problem later on, because like they'll like spaz out or whatever, or like that'll kind of set them off and have them have an issue. I was talking to Suli from El Salon, and she was saying that she actually had a VP at her job who seemed to have Asperger's. He was very like particular and very persnickety. Like he's like things done a certain way. Like he was like a little OCD with certain things. And the thing is, like, you know, for us, the like neurotypical people, something doesn't go the way or doesn't turn out the way we want, and we kind of like learn how to let it go and just like continue. But he would like perseverate on it. So it's kind of like she was able to work with him, but one of the other managers was having issues, so she had to kind of like pull him to the side and be like, hey, he might be on the spectrum, and those people are very rigid, and you know, you have to be a little bit more accepting. So that was one thing, and I feel like Mari also dealt with that. So
that's really interesting, but that's a skill that most managers don't have. Like that's not a background that most managers have. So to be able to spot that, like it's almost like you need a trained person on every single team, which is definitely not the case. Like most HR people that I've worked with, they have no idea what's happening on teams. That's not their job. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like, how do you even spot that in a world where people are uncomfortable sharing it?
Yeah, I feel like there has to be more solutions towards that. Even in the
that's what I want to do with.
Yeah, go.
I mean that's what I want to do with Plurawl. And it's not necessarily specific to special needs, but I mean even something. It's really, for me, it's about like, again, creating the representation that I wish I had when I was younger. Like I want people to know that they can be themselves and be successful. Like I had one guest on the podcast who identified as queer, but he said that he would only show his masculine side at work because he's never seen a man who is queer show their feminine side in a leadership role. You know what I mean? Like Tim Cook, for example, is from my understanding in reporting, I think he came out as gay. But like he's not showing the stereotypical feminine side of what we expect a queer person to be, right? Like, imagine if he was. I feel like kids would then feel comfortable showing that at work, right? Same thing for someone that has Asperger's, right? For someone to come out and say, like, yes, I have Asperger's, like, there's going to be a whole generation of people that be like, oh, shit, I can work in corporate. You know, I can be an author. I can do whatever, X, Y, and Z. So, like, that's what I'm trying to do is build that representation. But there's so many other things that I feel like are necessary.
This guy, what's his name? Elon Musk is actually, you know, on the spectrum. And, you know, you look at him and he can, you know, when he hosts certain shows, like he's on SNL, it kind of rubs people the wrong way. So it's like, you know, I get it. He can be a little bit abrasive sometimes because I feel like the things that he finds are funny are not necessarily taken as a joke by other people because of the way his humor is. But then again, I like the fact that he's out there and he's like a forward-facing person for his corporation, because that kind of, you know, gives kids that have special needs like a view of what it could be like, you know. I always like to do like research and like look at people that have special needs that have been successful in any field, like artistically or in the sciences and things like that. There's a doctor in, is it bovine science? It's like, well, the science that studies cows. Her name is Temple Grandin. So the first, like when Aiden, my son, first got diagnosed, I watched that movie about her, and it was like all her difficulties. And she grew up in the 50s when there was like really like that was like unheard of. Like, what is autism? We don't know. This is what you need to do. They told her mother to send her to like a mental hospital, you know, and that she would never be able to speak because like she was mute for a very long time. And then seeing her struggles and like how she was able to like surpass that was like amazing. But like, yeah, like the representation definitely matters. I feel like pointing that out and like showing kids like what it could be like, you know, like it is a certain way right now, but like what it could be like if we were all inclusive and like accepting of our differences, not only race-wise, disability-wise, like everything, like just accepting people for who they are and like creating environments where they feel like they can be themselves without being judged, you know?
Yeah. And it's not even about like representation just in the workforce too, like even in media, like to your point, like having people being open about it, like on TV shows, on movies, on all of those things, and not having it necessarily be like a story about like their struggles throughout life with autism or whatever their disability is, but more so just like give them a character development and all of those things, just like you would do an able person. You know what I mean? Someone without some of these special needs. Like one of my favorite shows, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on the show, like me and my girlfriend actually watch a show, is Love on the Spectrum.
Oh, I haven't.
It is you haven't seen it
yet. Who was telling me about
Yo,
it?
that show, that show is so cute. It's so adorable because it's so funny because like if you watch like any other dating show, all the contestants about to be like, when we fucking though, when you want that D, you know, come get it. I'm trying to get in these guts, ma. You know what I mean? And Love on the Spectrum, like they're like, you know, are you into dinosaurs? Because I'm really into dinosaurs. If you're not, like, this might not be for me.
That's
you know,
adorable.
It's and like I'm talking about the chivalry on these shows, like they don't just be coming with the dick and bubble gum. Like they be coming out with like full on picnics, flower. The dudes are so nice. It's the most wholesome, beautiful show I've ever been on. But the other thing too is that to your point, they're so honest about stuff. Like, the mom and the dads be like, so how was the day? And like dude be like, yeah, no, she's not for me, mom. No. It's so good. It's so good.
There's two shows about people with autism that I love. It's The Good Doctor, and what is the other one? It's about...
Yes, that's a really good show. I've only seen a couple episodes of that.
It's really good.
But that's another one. It's like he doing his thing, showing his strengths.
And he was treating a girl that had autism on the show, and she had like a brain, like they were operating her brain, but she had a boyfriend, and the boyfriend was there like trying to help her. Like he was scared to be in the operating room, but the way that they're into entomology, like the study of insects. So he was like naming all these bugs for her to keep her awake while she was getting operated. And I was like, oh my God, so sweet. And then there's another one that
it's real cute.
There's a boy into like penguins or something. And then the mom's like a helicopter mom. She doesn't really let him do his thing. And it was kind of like his struggle with like being his own person and being an individual and kind of like asserting himself apart from his family. And he decided to go away to college, and it's been hard for him, but it's like, it's such a good show. Like, and you know, like that. And then the thing is too, I want more representation of women on the spectrum as well, because I feel like, because girls, I feel, okay, so this is another statistic. Girls that have autism are often diagnosed later on. So boys, it's like apparent, like from 18 months on, they're not hitting those markers, right? Girls might hit the markers, and then they might be diagnosed with autism later, like 3-4 years old, right? And I don't know if it's because girls are supposed to be like more quiet and more reserved, and they're not flagged as easily as boys, because boys are supposed to be like quote unquote rambunctious and running amok and talking like crazy, and then if you don't see that, like it's easier to spot it in males. So then you know, like a lot of these shows, I see, you know, all of that, but then also I like that the concept that you were talking about love in the spectrum, because they're talking about women also with autism. Yes.
Yeah.
So like, you know, representation is so important, and it just, I don't know. So I was thinking.
Yeah, and they date on the show too, people on the spectrum and people out like that are not on the spectrum as well, which is really interesting. And it's fascinating too, because you get insight into even like what they're looking for. And it's so, and it's so funny because my girlfriend was looking at me. She was like, yeah, now one of them said like, I want that fat butt. Like nothing was like physical. Like everything that they mentioned were like non-physical things. And she was like, oh my God, look how cute. I was like, yeah, it was kind of adorable. But the other thing too is that, I saw some video and the dude was like, yo, like you would think that they would be less picky than people that are not on autism. Nah, they be having their criterias.
And
they got specific things that they're
better at following those rules. Because we were talking about that in one of the episodes. It's like, you know, having these criteria of like what you're looking for in a partner. But because they're like so focused, they're able to like really weed out the people that they don't want in their lives.
Yeah.
So,
and way better criteria than like I think any of us have. Like they got is really good. But sorry, you were gonna say something.
Aiden's like, if the vibe is off, he does not like. He was like he will not mess with you. He's like, whatever, peace, I'll see you later. Like he'll say hi, like he'll be cordial, but then he's like out and does his own thing.
That's so funny.
But when I was dating, when I first got divorced, like I like stayed a while without dating anybody because I was like working on myself. But then when I finally started dating again, I ended up matching with this guy. We went on a first date, and then I realized that he had autism. He was like on the spectrum. He had Asperger's. But I was like, good for him. Look at him, like going out there and doing his thing and like kind of going out of his comfort zone and doing things that are different. You know, after we were on the date, he like disclosed that he had autism. I didn't disqualify him because of that. It was just kind of like we really didn't have that many things in common. But like I'm just like, you know, go you, man. Like there's people that will like let that kind of like hold them back from doing the things that they need to do. So Pabel,
that's really cool.
Yeah. So I was gonna ask you, like, what do you think could be possible solutions to kind of open up the workplace and create like a place of understanding? I know you're doing a lot of the work right now, but like going forward, like with other companies, what do you think they could do to be a little bit more inclusive for people with special needs or people of color, or, you know, anybody that's quote unquote different from the status quo?
Yeah, I think representation is huge. That said, I mean, I think representation is huge. So I would think about it like diversity is one thing. When you think about diversity, right, it's just about getting people in the door. It's not even thinking about inclusion, right? So inclusion is a whole other thing. But when you think about diversity, you know, I would try to look at the stats of the general population, right? Like and we need to have the employee base mirror that population, right? So in New York, for example, let's just say, I'm making this up, let's just say the Hispanic population is 20%. You know what I mean? Like, Facebook's Hispanic population shouldn't be 5%. You know what I mean? And sure, like, there's a cap on the number of people that are even available and in the pools, et cetera. But I think there's a ton of opportunities to increase those numbers. And I think we need to, in increasing those numbers, I think that companies need to do some reflection on some of their policies, because I think a lot of the policies are biased, right? Like, I've been in interview rooms where, you know, they're choosing between two candidates, and one girl says, oh, let's look up his profile on Facebook. Like, I want to see if the person's fun. You know what I mean? But is that a qualification to be if they're fun? No, like, judge me on my skill and competence and experience for the role, right? Because if you judge people based on quote unquote fun, then that introduces bias. You're going to be like, oh, he doesn't go hiking, then like we can't get along. You know what I mean? So like, there's just a lot of bias right now that I think is that we need to weed out and remove to make it easier for people to apply. There's another one that's commonly like, you know, needed to graduate from a prestigious school or institution. Like, what the hell does prestigious mean? You know what I mean? And if you look at the prestigious schools, they're just as bad as the corporations that are hiring from them. You know what I mean? So hiring from the same pool isn't necessarily going to change anything, right? What does it say? Like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, but expecting a different result. You know what I mean? So there's a bunch of things that we can do from that standpoint, but that's just getting the people in the door. Once after that, then it's about inclusion and making people feel comfortable and welcome and all of those things. And to do that, I feel like often we put the blame on corporations and people on like microaggressions and racism. And yeah, that's a whole challenge. But I think that there's a lot that we can do as individuals. And I'm saying that we have the power to redefine professionalism. If we all need to show up as our most authentic selves, because what we do when we do that is we become a mirror for other people, right? So if someone walks into the room and sees me with my beard as a director, they'd be like, oh shit, like, I don't have to shave? Shit, but my abuelo back in the day told me I had to shave to like look professional. But it's simple stuff like that, right? Same thing, you see somebody's special needs, whatever it is, right? Like, we need to be our authentic self so that we can make people feel a lot more comfortable. I think those are like two things. And the third thing is like, which I already mentioned, which I'm really happy about, is the shift towards remote work. Because I think it just enables people from all over the world to compete for some of those positions where before it really depended on, you know, if you lived in Manhattan, for example. So I think those three things.
I think that's awesome. I honestly feel like with people like you or like me, kind of creating sensitivity training of like things that are and are not okay to say to people that are different than you. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I feel like a lot of the time, even like, you know, like in the media, when they fall short in representation, it's like they don't have people that look like us in the room to be like, yo, you know what? That is actually not okay to say to somebody, or that is not okay to portray, or like the way that you're portraying this is not the way that it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, even something as simple as like in Heights, when the guy was like, the Dominican Republic, like, people that are Dominican don't refer to Dominican Republic like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, little things like that, like little nuances will help corporations retain people. And like, it at the end of the day, they're trying to make money, right? They will make more money if they're more like they are more inclusive and more accepting of people that are different, you know, and that have different perspectives than they do.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like as a teacher, like kind of implementing social skills trainings, because it's not so much the academics, because academics, you know, I could teach my kids to read and write and do the math and all that stuff, but like conducting themselves in social environments, I feel like there's a lot that public schools especially can do to help the kids get there. Like, I know there's a lot of schools that I've worked at that have vocational training, and like they get the kids like little jobs, and they go out into the community, and they're able to see what it's like. But like, I feel like there's more steps that we can take towards preparing the kids for the workforce, and then being able to teach them how to advocate for themselves. Like, let's say they need a fidget. Like there's some people with autism that they get anxious and they need to have something like hold in their
Mm-hmm.
hand or like play with to like kind of just like help them calm themselves down. Advocating
Mm-hmm.
for that, like, listen, I need this to be able to do my job, so this is what I'm gonna do. You know what I'm saying? And for people to be okay with them, you know, requesting that I feel like that's important.
Yeah. That's one of the trainings I'm trying to do in the second half of next year. I'm trying to roll out this training to corporations around for employees, typically, you know, minority employees, to be able to communicate our emotions, which sounds like such a basic thing, but it's something that I didn't learn until I started going to therapy. And it's made such a positive impact on my like personal life, romantic life, but also my career. Because I think often we get hit with these microaggressions and racism at work, and we don't really know what to do in those situations. And for me to be like, yo, I feel unwelcome, unheard, and I don't know, insert another feeling, is way more productive than me like, they're like, yo, what the fuck, B? Like, you know? And then I get labeled aggressive, I get fired, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it just opens up a dialogue of really productive conversation, and people will respect you for that. And I feel like we don't often get taught that, right? We get taught how to do Excel, how to do PowerPoint, how to present in a meeting, but simple things like being able to communicate your emotions, I feel like would be really, really valuable. And I think it's like, because all the bias training, let's be honest, like, yeah, we can take it, but it's really for white people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But so if we're training them to do one thing, I feel like we need the training. I feel like that's the missing piece, right? On the inclusion side, like we're training them on one thing, although we're also taking training too, because we all have bias that we need to be aware of. I have bias. Yeah. I feel like we need the training on like these softer skills that are really, really helpful, such as communicating your emotions. So that's something I'm trying to do in 2022, but I got to do some other things first.
I love that. Like, I feel like at being my son's advocate, like I've learned how to communicate my feelings without being aggressive and like being labeled as the crazy mom.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because
yeah.
it's so easy for me. It's so easy to go from 0 to 100 real quick. But you know, once you get to that level that you're labeled aggressive, nobody's listening to the message that you're trying to communicate. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
In my son's school, when he first started junior high school, I basically felt like they weren't trying to accommodate him or get to know him. I was getting phone calls all the time, and I got pissed, right? Because I'm just like, listen, this is your specialty. You guys are special education teachers. You work with other kids with special needs. Like, what are you doing to welcome my kid and help him feel like this is his school? So instead of writing a crazy email and be like, bitch, I was like, I feel very disappointed in the school, and I feel like we are not being welcomed, and that my son is not being, you know, his needs are not being taken into account, and I don't feel like you guys are seeing him for who he is. So then that changed the tone real quick. Everybody was like, oh my God, I'm sorry, Miss Campos. What can we do? Blah, blah, blah. Do you want to come in for a meeting? And I went into the school and I showed my face. Because like at the end of the day, like, you know, you getting angry doesn't really take care of anything. It's you know, having effective communication and being able to tell people what you need, which is why I love the fact that you're doing these trainings, because I went to therapy, I'm able to communicate my feelings a little bit more clearly now, instead of just like, you know, reacting, because that was like where I used to come from. You know what I'm saying? But
first one's gonna go down in the heights 2022. You heard it here first.
Definitely send me the information. I'll make sure I'll bring you back, man. I feel like this was a very productive conversation. All right.
Yeah.
And with that, we are going to end the episode. As usual, you guys know what to do. Follow me at Comadreando Pod and follow Pabel at, drop your handle.
Plurawl, Plural.
Okay, and if you have any questions at all, if you want me to bring Pabel back, please feel free to send me a Comadre-Gram. Email me at comadreando@escthenetwork.com or DM me. You know, you can slide up into my DMs. I will be putting resources in the show notes, the articles that I looked up to get the statistics and all of that. And I will also be dropping Plural's web. You have a website, yes? Okay, I'll be dropping Plural's website, and if you want to reach out to Pabel for anything, you are more than welcome to. And with that, I want to say good night. Oh, and Happy New Year, Pabel. Guys, we're recording right before New Year's Eve, and it's tomorrow. So Happy New Year. Wishing you abundance and lots and lots and lots of success.
Peace. Happy New Year, y'all.
Bye.